Well, good morning. Good morning. It's lovely to have you here with us, and lovely to have those of you who will be joining us later through our YouTube channel. We hope that this time of worship is a blessing both to those gathered in the sanctuary and to those of you who will be gathering online. This Sunday, we are celebrating the 9th anniversary of the designation of being an affirming congregation, and you'll hear a little more about that later in the service. I'd like to thank Donna for all of the cupcakes that will be available following the service. We had thought that we might go outside, but the grass is very wet and the humidity kind of says maybe it's going to rain again. So what we're going to invite you to do is to pick up your cupcake and your lemonade, and then to come back into the sanctuary to visit so you can still do some social distancing. So if you have a few moments to stay and celebrate with us, there's, I think, more than adequate cupcakes for everyone. So every Sunday has a particular challenge. You know, it's like planning a wedding and nothing ever comes off 100% the way you've planned it. Well, Sunday worship can be a little bit like that. And our challenge this Sunday is that Ralph is not able to be with us because of cold symptoms and wondering about COVID implications and all of that. So Ralph has sent the music via audio files, and we are going to be singing with the help of the choir to audio music this morning. So we'll try to keep us moving at the correct pace, but you know, we may not. We gather on the traditional territory of the Nipissing First Nation. And even as we recognize that history and that heritage that is a part of this location, we also acknowledge that they have walked on this land with respect, walked lightly upon creation. And as we move towards truth and reconciliation, it is important that we are mindful of what we can learn from each other and how we really listen to each other. So as we look to the time this summer when there will be a particular focus on apology and reconciliation when the Pope visits in July, we too might be mindful of how we live into the fullness of that relationship. During the season of Easter, as we light the Christ candle, we are reminded that there is new life and new light, and that newness is a part of this season's celebration, calling us to follow the risen one, the one who brings the grace and love of God into our lives and into our world. And as a community of faith, we are grateful that we are called to be those who show that light for others, to live, as we will hear later in the service, in love for one another. And so I invite you to join with me in the call to worship, which is based on really the third reading, the epistle reading for the Sunday from Revelation 21. A new heaven, a new earth, a new way of thinking, a new way of being. We sing praise to the Creator who is making all things new. The way of death and mourning is no more, for the ways of the past have passed away, and God makes a home with humanity. We worship the Redeemer who is making all things new. A new commandment, to love one another, a new badge of faithfulness, and a renewed heart. God is making all things new. We pray to the Holy Spirit, who is making all things new. And we pray together, lifting our hearts to God. God, who makes all things new, in this time of worship, make of us a new thing. Even as the buds of spring push their way into the landscape, so let the bud with the promise of new heaven and new earth. May we live into the newness of your commandment, to love as we are loved, and in so doing to glorify your name and call to discipleship. Amen. Certainly this week has been almost more like summer than spring, but our opening hymn this morning as comes the breath of spring. When we enter into the presence of God, we are conscious that we have not lived into the fullness of the relationship that we are promised. And so it is good for us to come offering our confession, that we might also know the promise of God's grace and healing. Let us pray together. Holy God, in love you make all things new, and yet we often cling to the things of the past. When we hold on to barriers that separate us from others, forgive us. When we live as though death and mourning and tears are all that life offers, forgive us. When we fail to love others as you have loved us, forgive us. And make of us a new creation in the name of the risen Christ. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. We sing together our assurance of forgiveness and grace. Behold, behold.
Behold, behold, I make all things new, beginning with you, and starting from today. Behold, behold, I make all things new, my promise is true, for I am Christ the way.
So during this season of Easter, we've been hearing the readings from the book of Acts that talk about the life of the early church. And we continue the story of the early church today in Acts 11. It's a story about the church wrestling with who's in and who's out. Let us hear the story of Peter. So those who were believers and circumcised in Judah heard that there were Gentiles who had also welcomed the word of God. And so when Peter came down to Jerusalem, they confronted him and said, "How could you bring the gospel, the good news, to the Gentiles, to the uncircumcised, to those who eat all clean things?" And Peter began to speak, taking them step by step through his experience. He said that one day, while he was in prayer in Joppa, he began to be in a kind of trance, and he had a vision. And in the vision, there was a large sheet held by its four corners that seemed to come down from heaven. And it came closer and closer to him until he could see that there were all manner of animals, four-legged beasts, birds of prey, reptiles, fish of the sea. And then a voice came and said, "Peter, get up, kill, and eat." And Peter said, "I have never let an unclean thing pass my lips." And again the voice said, "Peter, if God has said all of these things are clean, how can you say that they are profane?" Peter went on to say that this happened 3 times. And then the cloth and everything seemed to go back up into heaven, and just as they were disappearing, 3 men from Caesarea appeared at the house where Peter was staying. And they asked for Peter to come with them to their master's house. And Peter felt the nudge of the Spirit, and so he went to visit where he had been invited. When he got to the house, the man told him that he had seen an angel outside of his house telling him that he should send to Joppa for a man called Simon, also named Peter. And that this man, Peter, would come with a message that would save he and his whole household. Peter began to speak of the gospel, and as he did, the Holy Spirit filled the house in the same way that it had come to the disciples in the beginning. And in that moment, Peter remembered the words of the Lord, that John baptizes with water, but you shall baptize with the Holy Spirit. And Peter said, if God gives the same Spirit to the Gentiles as he gave to us, who am I to hinder the work of God? All of the believers of Judea were silenced. And then they rejoiced. and said, if God can do this for the Gentiles and bring them repentance that brings new life, thanks be to God. And so the growth of the church continued.
Morning. Today's scripture reading is John 13, verses 31 to 35. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. But I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have loved one another." These words are offered as wisdom for our journey. Let us walk together in their truth.
Speak with the tongues of angels, speak with the voice of peace. And though I seek all the gifts of heaven, for behold all its mysteries, if I don't have lots of passion, if I speak without God's voice, my heart given and noble actions are as naught. For now we sing, only a glimpse of the things to be, as through a mirror dimly. The time and its offering, faith, hope, and love, abide below, abide above, but ever new and ever true. The greatest of these is love. Though I have faith to remove a mountain, Lord, my faith to command the hills, and if I dare in the face of danger, my own body to offer still, if I don't have what understanding, if I'm lost in love's own song, lovely words and willing actions are as wrong. For now we sing, only a glimpse of the things to be, as through a mirror dimly. Till time when with our free faith, hope and love, abide below, abide above, but ever new and ever true. The greatest of these is love. The breath of time rushes ever onward. Prophecy shall pass away. Our grandest words and our greatest knowledge shall be gone at the break of day. For the wisest of our wisdom and the boldest prophets all are merely shadows of the Holy One in all. So now we sing, only a glimpse of things to be, as through a mirror peace is love, but ever new and ever true. The greatest of these is love.
I invite you to pray with me. Holy Spirit, come, that in the words there might be wisdom, that in the hearing there might be truth, that in the openness there might be inspiration. Come, Spirit, come. Amen. These days, if you read much about church, or if you're in circles talking with friends who go to church, you know that we talk a lot about being new, about being the new church. But I was surprised a little about maybe just how much talk is going on, because when I Googled the phrase, new ways of being church, the search engine told me there were almost 7 billion hits. That's a lot of writing and a lot of talking about how to be new. So then I began to wonder, well, what do I mean when I use the word new in relationship to church? So I checked in the dictionary just to make sure I was clear on what new meant beyond the price tag on a new jacket or something like that. And yeah, pretty well they were all in line. So then I decided I'd check the Urban Dictionary. Now, if you've never heard of the Urban Dictionary, it's an online crowdsourced slang language dictionary. It tells you how the word is being used currently in mostly North American culture. So when I looked there, the word new meant totally clueless. Was one of the options. There were many, but one of them was to be totally clueless, as in, I'm new to this, I'm totally clueless about this. And I was thinking, maybe that's our problem. Maybe we really are totally clueless about how to be the church in new ways. And then I thought, good thing it doesn't depend on us. The church would be in dire straits if we were the ones that had to dream up how we could be church in new ways. But what the readings this morning remind us is that newness always comes from God. We don't have to dream it up. We just have to be open to its presence. The Spirit comes to Peter and says, I have a new way for you to think about community. I don't want you to think about who's in and who's out. I want you to think about how you can welcome all. The Spirit comes to John as he's lingering on the island of Patmos and says, a new creation is about to happen. A new heaven and a new earth. But don't look up, because God is going to be in the midst of the people, wiping away every tear, planting trees for healing by a river that is life. And the Spirit speaks through Jesus and says, disciples, you remember the 10 Commandments spoken to Moses, but I have a new commandment for you, one that will change everything. Love as I have loved you. Newness is about our ability to perceive how God is at work in the world and in our lives. Newness is comprehending in a different way what it means to live our faith, not focused towards end of life, but focused towards living in this moment, in this place. Newness is taking all of the laws that have been and seeing the good in them, but knowing that love is the measure of faithfulness. And God is doing a new thing. So what does it mean if, like Peter, we resist and we push back and say, well, I couldn't possibly do that because I've never let myself do that before. I've never let these lips touch unclean things. What are the paradigms that we can't let go of, that are so dear to us that we think they should order how we are community together? What if the reading from Revelation is really not only assurance that we hear at funeral services, but also a call for how we live here and now? Being community that wipes the tears of each other, that seeks healing from injustice, that seeks to restore creation, that really believes that God is in the midst of the people. And what if we were disciples who heard it not just as a theoretical statement that we should love each other, but first of all understood in our own lives and in our own hearts that we are so loved by Christ that we are empowered to love others beyond what we could do on our own. Now, wouldn't there be something new at work among us? There's a story told. It's called The Gift of the Rabbi, and I suspect many of you have read it in one place or another. It certainly is associated with Scott Peck, but it's a parable, if you will. It's about a group of aging monks who live in an aging monastery. How many folks have heard this story before? Oh, all right. So the story goes that there were a very small group of monks who had survived the pushback against the whole notion of monastery life. And they had lived in the monastery through all of those centuries, passing from generation to generation, even through the secularism of the early 20th century. But now they were 5, and all of them were over the age of 70. They were a dying order in a dying and crumbling monastery. Now it happened that in the woods near the monastery, there was a little hut to which the rabbi from the local town would go from time to time on retreat. It was like his hermitage. And over the years, the monks seemed to have developed, a sixth sense of when he was present and praying in the hut. And so one day the monks said to each other, "The rabbi's in the woods. The rabbi's in the woods." And the abbot decided maybe it was time to have a conversation with the rabbi. Maybe the rabbi had some great wisdom that could save the monastery. So the abbot went to visit the rabbi, and the rabbi opened the door and welcomed him in. And the abbot, within a few minutes, had stated his mission: "I've come to see, Rabbi, whether you have a word of wisdom that I might take back and save my order and our monastery." And the rabbi said to the abbot, "I have no such wisdom. It seems that indeed the Spirit has gone out of the people. Even in my synagogue, people do not come as they once did to pray. All I can do is commiserate with you. And so they wept together, and they read the Torah, and they talked of deep faith questions. And then the abbot decided it was time to return home to the monastery, and as he was leaving, the two men greeted each other with a blessing. And one more time, the abbot tried, "Rabbi, please, don't you have a word of wisdom that would save our order and our monastery?" The rabbi said, "I have no such wisdom. But this one thing I can tell you. The Messiah is one of you." So the abbot went back to the monastery. And, of course, the other monks gathered round him and said, "What did the rabbi say? What did the rabbi say?" And the abbot said, "Well, really, he didn't have a lot to say, just a cryptic comment as I was leaving, that the Messiah was one of us." Over the coming night and days and weeks, each of the monks began to ponder that cryptic comment. The Messiah is one of us. And they began to wonder who it might be. It might well be the abbot. He was so faithful and a great leader. It might be Brother Thomas. He was, the pious one among them, the one who prayed and seemed to have an inner light. It might be Brother Alfred. Oh, but he could be so crotchety. But then again, he did have a practical wisdom that was often of use to the order. It might be Brother Philip, but he was rather like, a wallflower. You didn't really take much notice of him, except he seemed to have a mysterious gift for always being there when you needed help. And then the monks actually began to question, well, could I be the one? Could I be the Messiah? And they each dismissed it, saying that would be far too much for God to ask of them. But as the weeks passed, they began to live differently with each other. They began to look with each other with a newfound kind of respect, intrigue, interest. And that sense of presence began to permeate even their work outside in the gardens, where they tended the grounds of the monastery. Something was beginning to change about this notion of dying. Now, it happened that the monastery was in a beautiful spot, and people would come from time to time to visit the historical buildings and to picnic on the lovely grounds that the monks tended. Children would play, and even from time to time, people would go into the crumbling chapel and meditate and pray. And those who came, well, they began to notice that there was a different atmosphere at the monastery. And people began to talk with the monks as they gardened. And one day, a young man talked to a monk and said, "Perhaps I could come and try to be part of your order. There seems to be such a peace and grace here." I would like to say he was the first of hundreds. He wasn't. But he was the first of a few. And of each one who came to share in the life of the monastery, a new energy began to bubble. And there was a new sense that the future could unfold before them, that God was in them. What does new look like? New looks like 5 aging old monks who begin to live differently with each other and who find new life for their crumbling monastery. New looks like a downtown congregation who may not like to admit it, but it is aging. And its building is beginning to show its age, perhaps more than beginning. Who begin to see each other through eyes of love. To see each other as beloved. And to begin to tend the garden of their community together in a way that brings hope that there is a future. That is what new looks like. May we just open our eyes and see its possibility. Thanks be to God. Amen. I see a new heaven, I see a new earth.
I see a new earth, as the old one will pass away.
We know how much we appreciate Ralph in person. As soon as Derek can cue it up, as the offering is brought forward by Bethany, I invite you to stand as we sing, "What Can I Do? What Can I Bring?" What can I do? What can I bring? What can I say? What can I say? I'll sing with joy, I'll say a prayer, I'll bring my love, I'll do my share. What can I do? What can I bring? What can I say? I sing. I'll bring my love, I'll do my share. Let us pray. Generous, life-giving God, we bring our prayers asking for blessings upon others. We bring our love, asking we touch the lives of others. We bring our joyful song, offering our gratitude. Receive what we bring and make of our offering a gift of grace. Amen. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the service, it was in May of 2013 that this congregation received its designation as an affirming ministry of the United Church of Canada. And so each year, as a part of the commitment to live that ministry, we remember that that designation is a part of the identity of the congregation. The words that are going to be shared in the images actually come to us as a gift from Ralph, who, when I said, I'm struggling with what we're going to do this year to do that, offered this way of celebrating. I'd also want to say that over our community candle, we do have a prayer token that is about gratefulness. And someone in the congregation asked that that be placed today, showing their gratefulness for the affirming commitment of St. Andrew's. So I think I've got the choir queued up behind me, and we are going to celebrate that heritage. St. Andrew's has been affirming for 9 years now. So what does affirming look like? When affirming and being open to the diversity of life becomes intertwined in our lives, what does that bring us? What does it look like?
It looks like Berbera, bursting with life, sprouting out of dark, rich soil.
It looks like ropes, untied and chains released.
It looks like binoculars. Lift them up, peer through them, and suddenly vivid details appear we never picked up on before.
It looks like a bird, flying high, flying free, flying proud, floating in the air.
Affirming looks like affection, caring, protection, connection, celebrating the strong, invisible bonds between us.
Affirming looks like a church, where light pours through the windows, where there is room in the pews for others to gather with us, where there is a friendly welcome at the door.
Affirming looks like our regular, ordinary lives, with a generous swirl of love and consideration deliberately swirled in. Thank you for all you have done to bring the richness and diversity of God's love alive here, in this church, in our time and place, and to share that with the world. We continue to strive to build a house of which God is proud. Let us sing. Let us pray. God of every person, we thank you for the day 9 years ago when we set out on our journey called Affirming. We have been blessed over and over by those who came to us because they heard this news. We have tried and very often succeeded in bearing faithful public witness to our affirming values of safety, inclusion, and nurturing each other's faith. Where we have fallen short, we ask forgiveness. We ask you to help us try again, strengthened by your love. God of every refugee, as a community committed to safety, inclusion, and the commandments of our faith, we thank you for those groups of people who are rescuing those refugees who face persecution and death, specifically because of their orientation. These groups of people, the Rainbow Railroad, the Metropolitan Community Church in Toronto, Rainbow Refugee, these are all essential since Putin's regime has made homophobia state policy. Keep us mindful of the need to stand with those whose very flight is very dangerous. Strengthen them and us with your love. God of every lake and river, we thank you for the lovely sight of ice-free water. We are blessed with spring flowers and trees that are leafing out, as always, with the fresh new green we see only at this time of year. We rejoice in this. And as temperatures move already from warm to hot, keep that precious water safe. And keep us mindful of all people with no air conditioners, no home, and nothing to shield them from a changing climate. Strengthen them and us with your love. Loving God, we are grateful for all the ways you appear to us here in North Bay. When we are fearful for the world, we can go down to the lake and watch the ducks, splashing and feeding in the water as they have for millennia. When we despair at the cruelty of war, we can come and sit in a church that is determined to seek peace and offer welcome. When we do not remember how to open our hearts to you, we can sing a beloved hymn and allow the music to do that for us. So now, God of love, stay with us. Let us be open-hearted and filled with new life, for we are Christians, and we are called to live lives of love rather than despair. We are called to walk with you in whatever way you appear, as friend, refugee, parent, or child. We know that you will always walk with us, especially when we are ill. And we ask your special blessing this day on those friends that we name now, aloud or in the silence of our hearts.
David McNamara.
Dave, Christy, Bob, Diana, Melody, Kathy, Bradley.
We thank you for this time with you and your people, God. Stay with us through the week and bring us courage as we need it and joy always in your beautiful world. We ask this in the name of your Son and our friend, Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Donna, for leading us in prayer. And in case you hadn't been aware, Donna is acting as the chair of our inclusivity committee, so it's particularly appropriate that she was leading us in prayer on this day. Now, if you thought it was challenging to get the timing from some of the other hymns, this one's going to be more, but it's joyful, right, folks? So just sing it, try to follow the choir, that will try and follow the soundtrack, and make a joyful noise as we sing Sia Hamba. You need to stand for this one. Slowly at first. Oh, right, it's going to be slow at first. The choir's part is slow.
We are living in the light of God. We are living in the light of God.
We are living in the light of God. We are living in the light of God.
We are living, we are living.
Oh, we are living in the light of God.
We are living, we are living.
Oh, we are living in the light of God.
We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching. We are marching in the light of God. See a hamba kukaneri go. See a hamba kukaneri go. See a hamba kukaneri go. See a hamba kukaneri go.
See a hamba.
We are singing in the light of God. 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 We are singing, singing, we are singing. We are singing in the light of God. We are singing, singing, we are singing. We are singing in the light of God.
A new day, a new beginning, a new love, a new commandment. Go forth to explore where God is making all things new. Look for tears turning into smiles. Look for flowers beginning to bloom. Look for opportunities to make new friends of those who were strangers. For God is making a new creation, and you are called to be part of it. Blessed by the God who is always creating, by the resurrected Christ who brings new life, and by the Holy Spirit who surprises us in new ways. Amen.
Well, I don't have the sound file for this, so it's going to have to be a cappella.
Oh, I can maybe give you a few notes.
Wanders onward to the rising of the sun. May the wind that blows among us help us travel through all harm till the evening of light shines.
please. Good job.
You are invited for lemonade and cupcakes.